Joining me now are Rick Guerrero, the Executive Director of Cuba Now. He is a former Executive Director of the Miami-Dade Democratic Party. Attorney Stephen Probst, an expert on export control law, economic sanctions, and international trade policy. And from Havana, William Leogrand, a professor at American University and the co-author of the book Back Channel to Cuba, The Hidden History of Negotiations Between Washington and Havana. Stephen Probst, first of all, to you, the technical aspects of today's announcement. When will these things happen? I've actually been planning a return trip to Cuba. When can I use my credit card there?
Well, Lawrence, the changes that were announced today, as the Treasury Department has made, and they will not take effect until the administration actually issues regulations or amends existing regulations to implement these provisions that the president has announced today.
And Stephen, those regulations can sometimes take quite a while, months, and some frequently solicit public comment. Is it going to be that kind of process that they go through?
Well, in this situation, actually, the president and executive branch actually have fairly broad authority to conduct the foreign affairs of the United States and to establish regulations that implement foreign policy. And so in this situation, it's not unusual to see the government actually go ahead and issue final regulations or interim final rules and allow the public to comment after those regulations have been issued. So, the president really has some discretion here to decide how to do this. But I think given how dramatic the announcement was today, I think that you'll start to see some regulatory changes here fairly quickly.
Rick Guerrero, your reaction to this announcement today?
It's historic. I think the steps that the president has taken are in the right direction. They're well within his authority and are going to do more to help empower the Cuban people than 50 years of blanket sanctions have been able to achieve.
And William Leogrand, you've been on this program before talking about what the president could actually do to move forward. The president has been to some extent restricted by legislation that was only, the embargo was only codified in law in the 1990s when Bill Clinton made the horrible mistake of signing Helms-Burton into law. It had never been law before. It was within the president's power to kind of dismantle it. But it seems today that what the president has found is every way outside of Helms-Burton that he can make a change.
Well, I think the president has gone about as far as he could go in this package of changes under his own executive authority. And there are still some areas where Congress is going to have to act if we're going to have a fully and completely normal relationship. Tourist travel is still prohibited, changes in the Helms-Burton Act, but the president has been very bold in using his executive authority to really move very far down the road. And most importantly, he's really changed the whole framework of relations. This is, I think, historic indeed, very much in the model of Nixon going to China to change fundamentally U.S. policy.
And William, there in Havana tonight, what is the reaction that you've been picking up in Cuba today?
Well, I think the reaction is a joy and relief that this 50 years of hostility may finally be coming to an end, and anticipation that the restoration of normal relations, especially normal economic relations, will begin to improve the Cuban economy and raise the standard of living of ordinary people.
And Stephen Probst, some of the things that have to happen apparently will include possibly appropriations for an embassy in Havana, along with Senate confirmation of an ambassador. The president said today we're going to have our first Cuban ambassador of the 21st century. Those will be the obvious spots down the road where we'll hear from the opponents of this in the Senate, certainly.
That's correct. There are a number of areas where congressional action and congressional approval will be required. Of course, Congress has the power of the purse and can exert some pressure there. But I think that the fact is that the authority for the president to make the changes that he made today is actually built into the legislative framework that Congress itself set up. And so when you look at the statutory provisions and the regulatory provisions that implement the sanctions against Cuba, those provisions actually themselves establish or give the president the discretion to make exceptions to the prohibitions that are built into the sanctions. And interestingly, the General Accountability Office, the GAO, which is the Congress's own investigative authority, has looked at this twice over the last 20 years, and both times they agreed clearly that the president does have the authority to do what he did today. So I think that the president's action today is actually legally on very firm ground. They will go in implementing regulations that change the regulations.
Rick Herrero, it is my assessment, and I'd be interested in yours, that President Obama is the first president who has shown leadership on Cuba policy in the Castro era, the first one in 50 years, certainly through with the nuclear weapons being located there and all, leaving that aside because there was a very real confrontation involving the Soviet Union and Cuba. Once you move forward from there, every president, when faced with any kind of question about Cuba policy, always, it seemed to me, took the politically easy route. That's what we saw the last time it came to the president's desk, or the only time the embargo came to the president's desk as legislation. Bill Clinton should have vetoed it. He knew vetoing it was the right thing to do. He didn't have the political courage to do that. This president seems to be operating in a different political atmosphere, though. Even though he's showing the most leadership on it, he also has the most public support to show that leadership, doesn't he?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, by and large, the American people and the Cuban American community has lost faith in our 50-year-old embargo and in a policy of isolation. I think what President Obama has done, he has taken very bold steps in completely shifting the focus of this policy from one being from the previous focus, which was basically trying to punish the regime and trying to micromanage a transition from the United States, to a policy that's much more focused on the people and helping to empower them and increasing the flow of contacts and resources from American civil society to the Cuban people so that they may be in a better position to demand greater changes from their own government.
William Leo Grant, before we go, I just want to mention that Hillary Clinton issued a statement fully supporting a statement saying that the president has just rewarded those dictators. What is the likelihood, if there is another President Bush, that what President Obama has done today would be reversed by executive order?
Well, if a Republican president, a conservative Republican president like Jeb Bush becomes our next president, he certainly has the power to reverse a lot of these changes. But I think that will be politically difficult. It's legally possible, but I think that there's enormous relief and support across not only the United States for this change in policy, but also across Latin America and with our allies around the world.
William Leo Grant, thank you very much for joining us on this historic day from Havana. Also, Stephen Probst and Rick Herrero, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.